Good evening and welcome to the Common Council for August 28th, 2012. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Riley.
Present.
Anderson.
Present.
Jarvis. Here. Markham.
Here.
Fowler.
Here.
Hanson.
Present.
Sedlacek.
Present.
Williams.
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is the approval of items for the consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed.
So moved, Alder Anderson.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Alderman Hanson.
If I want to take something off the agenda, how does that work?
You object to the consent agenda and make a motion to move it down to item 6.
You don't have to make a motion, right? I can automatically take something off.
Sure.
correct? Okay. Thank you.
You weren't here.
It's just asking how to do it.
Okay.
I was going to take F off just to practice some, but I thought that would be.
We did it at the last meeting.
Well, we have a passing grade though, right? So. Any other discussion?
Apparently you guys don't know how to be that efficient. Don't blame Charlie. Just lost my 5 minutes.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You just wanted to run the meeting 5 minutes longer, I know that, okay. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the audience portion where we ask people to sign in and be recognized by the chair. Tonight we have no one who is signed up. We do encourage citizens to come forward and address the council. This is where you get to tell us what your concerns are and we get to listen. So we always want to encourage people to come forward. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items as indicated.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda items A through F.
I second that.
We have a first and a second to approve the consent agenda A through F. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Hanson.
Yes.
Jarvis.
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Consent agenda is hereby approved. Item 6 is not necessary, so we'll delete that. Item 7, presentation by Phil Cawson of Ehlers and Associates regarding revenue bond refinancing and financing options for the lead service line replacement program. Good evening, Phil. Welcome to the City of Plymouth once again.
Thank you, Mayor.
And tell us what our options are, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I actually have new faces here on my left. I'm Phil Costin with Ehlers and Associates. Nice to meet both of you. We work as the city's financial advisor, and one of our roles is to constantly look at, see if there's any debt that could be refinanced. It's a concept which is very similar to when you refinance your home mortgage. City issues debt from time to time for various capital projects. Utility projects have historically in the city borrowed money under a revenue bond authority, and the city, when they have gone through and issued debt for general purposes, have issued general obligation bonds. So we look at both, and tonight we're coming to you again with the ability to look at, to refinance one of your existing debt obligations. We just went through this, if you know, last year, another debt refinancing. So the issue we're looking at in the front page is the 2003 combined utility revenue bond. And I handed out this document just prior to the meeting. On the second page in is a list of all of the outstanding utility revenue debt obligations. There were two others that are on here that both matured this year and paid off this year. So two of the debt obligations have fallen off. Last payment was in 2012. The first issue is the one we're looking at. You can see has interest rates that range from 3.8% to about 4.3%. On the bottom of the page, the last row says, there's no small print, it says call. Call is when are the bonds callable? When can they be prepaid or paid off or refinanced? And you can see it says 5/1/14. So this would, if we undertook this, this would be called an advance refunding. And for every debt obligation, you can advance refinance something only one time. The other call dates you can see are listed. As you get further out with a call date, it becomes more and more difficult to refinance that because you have to set up an escrow, and there's something called negative arbitrage, and it makes it difficult for refinancing to work. The 05 issue was also a 5/1/14 call, so you may ask yourself, why are we looking at one and not both? That issue was advance refunded, so we couldn't call that until actually the 5/1/14 call date or any date thereafter. So the other issues are further out. So that's the issue we're looking at, is the 2003 combined utility revenue bond. So we ran two scenarios at the request of Mr. Yurgis. We ran a traditional revenue bond. So this is just issuing debt on a revenue basis, meaning the pledge for repayment on the bonds comes from user revenues, not from the general levy, but from the actual users of water, sewer, and the electric system, and which is really what's been done historically. So the first option is looking at doing a revenue bond. You can see the first couple of lines on here are the process of refinancing a debt obligation, the amount that goes into an escrow to pay off the old bonds and establish a new bond. We have a reserve fund that's in place. We're able to, as a result of some of the debt being paid off, reduce the reserve fund a little bit. And then if you look down where it says new projects, this is the 450 in new money that's been discussed as far as the, I'm going to need help. What was it called again?
Lead service line.
Lead service line replacement. Couldn't come up with that one. So thank you, Brian. So those are the new projects that have been identified. We've added that to this. We actually brought this to the city without those new projects. It's just a pure refinancing without any new projects, and we were asked to add that. We have the expenses that are identified. Because it's an advanced refunding, you have to have a CPA, independent CPA verification of the escrow. And there are some additional costs, about $1,500 to $2,000 as a result of doing an advanced refunding versus a current refunding. The net issue size would be $4.7 million. On the next page is the breakdown of just the piece that would be refinanced, not the new money. So this pulls out the new project funding piece of this and looks at just why are you looking to refinance this debt? What is the actual savings to do that? The first couple of columns are the existing debt, the debt to be refunded, and then the portion that is not callable yet. That stays in place. And you end up with a total principal and interest column. The new debt issue says new debt service on the top. You can see the estimated rates identified in blue compared to the green numbers that you see. That's why we're looking at refinancing this is instead of pick a year, 2020, 4.15%, we're looking at about 1.83%. And then the far right-hand column is just the difference between the old issue and the new issue and the actual annual savings. You can see in this case about $20,000 on average. $220,000 over the life of the issue. Difference in reserve fund is factored in, and a total savings of $256,000, which is about 4.6% net present value. So the net present value number looks at what portion of the existing bonds are being saved. So in this case, you're looking at about 4.5% savings. So about $20,000 a year. Everybody follow that? Okay. Second, at the request again of Mr. Yurgis, we added a second option of refinancing this as a general obligation instead of doing a revenue bond, and there's two savings as a result of doing that. One, you save a little bit in issuance expenses. Bond counsel charges a little bit less advisors, we charge a little bit less as well as a result of doing a revenue bond. You'll also save on interest rate a little bit. It's usually about a 0.25% ballpark difference. General obligation will always sell a little bit better than a revenue bond, and it's really a pledge of security that they're looking at. The bond purchaser looks at it as pledge of security. The most secure debt is general obligation debt, which has the whole levy power of the city behind it, versus a revenue bond, which has the power of the water and sewer pledge, which is the lesser pledge. And that's why it trades a little bit different, not dramatically. In this case, again, because some of the costs are less, we end up at $4,650,000. The savings is a little bit greater. Instead of about $20,000 a year on the next page, it's about $25,000 a year by doing it as general obligation. The difference between the two ends up being about 65, roughly 60, I think it was $63,000. It's a projection. We don't know exactly where it would end up different, but it's around, to do it general obligation versus revenue saves the city an additional about $65,000. Why would you do it? Well, you do it as a general obligation for the greater savings. That's why you would do it. That's the pro behind it. The con behind it is it counts towards your borrowing capacity. The city has, like every other municipality, has a limited borrowing capacity, which is 5% of the value of the community. And so this issue then would count against the borrowing capacity. You're not bumping up against that level, against your borrowing capacity. You're not in danger of being really high. It's just, that's the negative. It counts towards the borrowing capacity. So those are the two options that we laid out. In case you want to know, the last page, we've included the city's general obligation debt. It looks like a big number. A great deal of this debt is tied back to the tax increment districts. And so you can see the different debt issues here. If you look again at that last row where it says call date, you can see a lot of the calls are out late teens, early 20s. There is one as 5/1/14, the 03 general obligation issue, but it's paid off already in 2014. You have two more payments. You're not going to, there's no reason to refinance this. It's going to be paid off relatively short order. So there's really nothing on the general obligation side of the ledger that makes sense to refinance. The only one right now is the 03 combined utility revenue issue. So we talked not just about the two options, but we also talked a little bit about timing. I think initially when we brought this, and Brian and I met a couple of weeks ago, we talked about possibly, if it was approved, selling this as early as your second meeting in September. But I know you still have some discussions you want to have regarding the capital side of this, and so that may push a couple of weeks later.
The Public Works and Utilities Committee met to discuss the lead service line program, which is tied to the consent order or agenda item 8A. And part of that requires a minimum replacement of 91 lead service lines, which is estimated to cost around $450,000. We may have to replace up to 122 by the end of 2013. And so we're looking at adding potentially adding that into the cost of this bond program. The other thing is, it came up at the committee level that they would like to review the utilities capital improvement requests prior to making a decision on the final dollar amount for what we want to borrow, and so that review has not been completed yet. So we're looking to do that hopefully here in early December to have, or September to have some discussions about that. And then hopefully in a relatively short period determine the dollar amount, what we would want to borrow, and then refinance that. So if we discuss that in September, we're looking at October before we would take final action. So that's kind of where we're at. But in the meantime, I think what we want is a clear indication, at least from the council, to Phil, that yes, we do want to at a minimum go forward with the bond refinancing opportunity. And I guess the big decision is whether we would want to do it on a revenue or GO basis. And maybe we can determine that here in early September as well. But I think, Phil wants an indication that we'll be moving forward this fall with that refinancing opportunity, and I don't see a reason why we wouldn't at least refinance the debt. I guess the policy decision is, that needs to be determined is what we would want to add to it, and whether we would want to do a revenue or geo.
And Brian, may I add one?
Yep.
Just for again, the new council members, the process here is that typically the council would authorize a bond sale. It gives us permission to proceed with it. You're not approving it final, but you're giving us permission to proceed with it. And then a month later, there's a lot of documentation, there's an official statement prepared, there's a rating call with Moody's Investor Service because you're rated, that would take place. And then about a month later, the sale would occur. We would come back to you with the actual sale results, once we took bids, and then it would be approved by resolution that following night. So it's kind of a two-step process to get through a sale.
Correct.
We
So
would-
what we would be looking at potentially late September, the sale, or the first resolution, and then are you thinking the first or second meeting
It could be
for the
either
actual
one.
sale? Yeah, so if we made those policy decisions by the second meeting in September, we could have the sale in October. So I guess that's a question of whether all of that policy discussion will be completed or not, but that's kind of what we're looking at.
For the council, what we're looking at then is September is the 11th and the 25th. October is the 9th and 30th. So this would push it later in the budget cycle, but certainly we need that decision to be part of the budget cycle and the projections that would come into next year. So I would think that the utility committee, Alderperson Jarvis would probably have some final suggestions for the council sometime mid to late September. And Phil, you need 30 days
Roughly. I mean, we would.
to be safe.
If we knew things were moving forward, we'd start the paperwork back and
Yeah.
forth between the city, and that would
So we're
expedite it.
looking at probably October 9th at the earliest
Right.
with that in consideration. And depending on things, then it would be October 30th. Now, we also could, of course, call a special council meeting if it was prudent to do that based on the numbers and the timing. But that gives us time to work. What's the general, Alderperson Jarvis, do you want to add in any particular comments on, we'll ask kind of an up and down to proceed type thing? Is that something that we want to do?
Sure. Yeah, I would be, we discussed briefly in the utility committee where the source of funding would come from for the lead service line project of approximately $450,000, which could end up being larger depending on how those initial, replacing those lead lines, how they may impact the sampling of the water. And if we successfully pass that phase, then we may not have to replace additional lines. So we talked a little bit about whether to lump sum the 120 lines to be replaced versus the 91 to be replaced. And I think that from the committee's perspective, we thought that let's just stick to the 91 right now, and that since we are refinancing this other debt, that it would make sense to add the $450,000 for the lead service line project to this, rather than taking it out of the utilities reserves. So I'd be in favor of adding the lead service line project to this refinancing.
As a point of clarification, so everybody understands, we are committed to do 91. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So we have to do 91 lines, not picked yet, to be picked.
And publicly bid.
Right, but we would have to do a minimum of 91 based on the agreement that we worked out with the DNR.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't think we need, I just want a consensus that, I mean, everyone agrees we should move forward with the refinancing opportunity. There's no.
I mean, that's
pretty
why we
given.
have to do it.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's what Phil was here to talk about tonight. I think in early September, there's going to be some meetings with some committees, and those other policy decisions will be hopefully made in the near future. So, I mean, I guess that's why Phil was here tonight, to give this presentation, and we need to do some work on our end and get back to Phil, and then he'll be preparing the resolution to proceed with the bond sale, and then we'll have the sale and the final resolution.
Alderman
So-
Anderson?
I know we don't want to rush into it, but it was also brought up, we would like to get this done before the election, because we don't know what's going to happen after that.
And October is sometimes a historically volatile.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
You
yeah, I mean, we
don't
can-
have
we
a
can-
crystal ball, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a crystal. Phil and I talked, yeah, Phil and I talked about this a little bit. Phil's opinion would be that there's probably not much of an impact. You don't know, so.
I'd prefer to see it in October than November, because that's as far as I'll go
Well,
with the
and
prediction.
the time is,
have no
the time
idea.
is good,
Yeah.
so,
Rates are
and
still
we're
great,
on
so.
track, so that's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we started with Alderperson Jarvis, let's go around the room, and we got thumb up,
Thumb up.
up.
My thumb goes up for the 610 for the 122.
We're moving forward. Thumb up, okay.
Any thoughts on revenue versus GO? That'll dictate a little bit of the paperwork that goes back and
Yeah.
forth. So I don't want to request, nor John or Patty want me to request information that we don't need, and I'd hate to do that.
It would seem that GO would be a appropriate, logical, we're not up against the ceiling,
I don't think it's.
Brian, are we in that regard at all?
No, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. You
So
look at
we've
our
got
capital improvement.
Flexibility.
You look at our capital improvement, project plan, the big projects or the big issue is really fire department equipment. So you look at that, we don't have any multi-million-dollar buildings that we're
Okay.
building anytime soon, so I don't see, doing this one as a,
So we don't have
GO,
a problem
as an issue.
with our ceiling, okay. So
Okay.
GO seems like a good
Okay.
consensus as well.
Okay,
Super.
all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. We always appreciate you coming and visiting with us, and if the new members have any questions, certainly Phil in his office is very agreeable to get into discussions and explanations, so thank you very much. Next item is item 8, Public Works and Utility Committee, discussion and approval for mayor and clerk to sign Wisconsin DNR consent order regarding the implementation of a lead service line replacement program. And I would ask Alderperson Jarvis to make a motion, and then we'll discuss it and we'll fill in some of the gaps on the paragraph is a little short, but our administrator will fill in some of the gaps. Alderperson Jarvis?
I move to approve the signing by the mayor and clerk of the Wisconsin DNR consent order regarding the implementation of a lead service line replacement program.
Second, Alder Anderson.
We have a first and a second. Administrator Jurgis, you want to now fill in that gap of why we're doing this?
Yeah, just real quickly, I don't know how detailed you want me to get, but obviously in the packet, there's a city council communication form. There's an issue summary there, basically. In fall of 2011, we exceeded our lead level in September of 2011, and as a result, that triggered discussion with the DNR, utility staff, and myself. We met with the DNR in late December 2011 and we attempted to do a corrosion control treatment study and adjusted the chemical feed and attempt to get back into compliance. We delayed signing a consent order as long as possible. We have not gotten back into compliance, and so at this point, DNR is pressing us to enter into a consent order. That consent order will require us to replace 91 lead service lines by June 30th, 2013. If within the next 2 testing periods, if we don't get back into compliance, we'll have to replace an additional 31 by December 31st, 2013, and so we're looking at 122 potentially in 2013, and then ongoing, we will have to replace 7% annually until we are back into compliance for 2 consecutive 6-month testing periods. So basically, we have 878 lead service lines. So that's roughly the 61, 62 lead service lines per year that we will have to replace until we're back into compliance. Once we're back into compliance, we can cease the lead service line replacement program and go on additional monitoring. And if we return out of compliance, most likely we'll be forced to enter into a new consent order and begin the lead service line replacement program again. So we're looking at, no matter what, the 91 lead service lines as the best case. The worst case scenario is that we have to replace 122 by the end of next year. I guess I would ask if the utility manager, John McKinnon, if he wanted to comment, any other comments related to this that you wanted to point out, or?
Thank you, City Administrator Hargis, but no, I think you captured it.
Okay.
It's a short item, but of course it has a big price tag, and certainly at this point, we're monitoring it and trying to move along as best we can, and we will be having further discussions in utility committee, and we'll see where that goes. But at this situation, this is the agreement that we had the first and second on, and the purpose for it, and hopefully we can resolve it on the minimum side rather than the maximum side. Any other comments?
I have a question. After we do the 91, and then they come in and do their inspections, where do they inspect at? Will it be throughout the city, or will they be inspecting the 91 that we've corrected? Or,
Well, we have to make an annual report as to the locations as to what we've replaced. On top of that, we have to do sampling every 6-month period. And so those results get reported to the DNR. And as long as we continue not to have if we have 2 consecutive periods where we are underneath and do not exceed the levels, then we are simply on a monitoring program. If we fail either one of those within the next 12 months, we have to continue the 7% annually. And so, we have to continue to do those sampling, and we have to continue to report on an annual basis what we're replacing.
Was your question?
the question was, when we do our
specific
samples, specifically
sampling?
where do we sample at after we've done the 91?
John, is that a random approach? Why don't you describe for us the methodology for that? I think that's what.
Sampling work is done at the
Alderperson
customer's
Williams was
tab.
asking.
And that creates a challenge for us because we have no control of how the sampling procedure is being carried out by customers. We give the customers instructions on how to do the sampling, and I'm sure they try to do it to the best of their ability, but they're not certified lab people taking samples. So it creates a weakness in the program, but that's the requirements of by the federal government, how this program is supposed to be executed with water samples from the customer's tap. And
even at that, the program has some protocols into it which says that 10% of those samples can be over the threshold, the other 90% are under the threshold, everything's fine. There's real difficulties with inside the program itself, and we have been informed that that program is being re-looked at by the federal government. We do not know what changes may be brought forward, but at this point in time, the rules are still in place with some of these oddities. And I guess that's about the best way to put it. The samples are done, the samples are taken from the customer's tap and analyzed.
John, do we still have potential for problems since we're just going to be taking care of water delivery up to the curb, and the pipes from the curb into the residents are not going to be changed?
That's correct, and as we do the lead replacement program, one of the obligations we have is to inform that resident of that fact and provide the resident with an opportunity and a cost tag was what it would take to replace his portion of the water service line into the house. And so I don't know if that helps your
No, that's
questioning, but it's, as you see, the expense even on our portion was $5,000 a service. It's not inexpensive, and maybe a difficult time for some of our residents, even in desiring to make that change out, be able to afford to make that change out. So in our lead education, what we do, we offer customers information as to what they can do to mitigate their exposure to drinking, possibly drinking lead out of the water supply system. And there's filters you can put on your system, probably less expensive than changing out your water service. And then also there's options of buying bottled water to augment your drinking water supply. Continue to use our water supply for other, for showering and washing clothes, things like that. So,
we do want to inform the public that, you know, this is not a dire straight thing. I mean, we are taking positive steps to work with the level of regulation that we're working with, but this is not a high-risk level to our citizens, and these are the older sections of town that have some of the lead piping. In the new parts of town, lead was not used, so we're looking at some of the much older areas of the city. But the risk here, this is not a high-risk level of lead that's being detected. It's just that it is within the guidelines of the test, and therefore we have to proceed with additional steps, and we're looking into that. Alderperson Jarvis?
I think I heard Alder Williams ask another question about whether after the 91 lines have been replaced, will those be the ones that are sampled, or what's the protocol in the compliance phase? Will we be sampling some of those 91, or is it a random sample?
we'll be focusing on, our priority will be focusing on those lines that remain that are led up in the utility system. And we have possibly going back to the lines that have been replaced, but again, they're not, those lines should probably not show the high probability of having lead in the service as you would from having the line being entirely led from the main into the customer's house.
Mm.
So as we keep going, we're going to have some challenges trying to find enough of the existing services to continue to test from. We will have to end up going back to some of those that are a hybrid, that the customer still has lead and going into their house and test on that. At the end of the day, we can replace all the lead services. We still do that test that required by the federal government at the customer's tap. And as long as the numbers exceed the federal standard, we still have to serve the notice to the customer, and we've done everything we can. We treated the water, we've replaced lead services, but the customer still has this challenge, knowing that they exceed the federal standard.
So do we get to pick which lines are going to be sampled after we've replaced the 91? Or is it going to be dictated by the DNR?
The municipality picks the lines that will be sampled.
Okay.
Well, the DNR reviews those results. And an interesting thing is we went through this procedure, we went back and retested some of the lines that came in high and got lower numbers. And that's because you have to understand the discrepancy in having someone test their own, give you samples from their own water system. It's not consistent, and it proved out in the test. The fact that the DNR under the federal government guidelines don't allow you to give you a do-over. They take that first sample, and you can take another sample, but they don't allow you to throw out the what appears to be the bad analysis.
So every sample has to be reported. So we take a sample, every single one is reported. So,
Yeah.
And what,
Okay, thank you.
the scary thing is the potential liability is like $4.4 million if we had to replace everything, the whole system. And we will at some point in the future as we replace water main in older neighborhoods, that lead service will be replaced, but this forces us to spend money that we had not anticipated.
I think I commented to somebody about the drinking water in our services, and I have no problem going to anybody's house and drinking their water. I mean, I guess I understand the risk involved, and knowing the thresholds that we're dealing with, parts per billion, we're talking here the standard's 15 parts per billion, and think about how many people are in the state of Wisconsin, or how many people in the United States. Was 200 million in the United States? So we have 1 billion people here in the United States. It'd be one person or 15 people out of a billion. Those are extreme numbers. And am I concerned about the lead abatement program? Yes, but I think here you have to question the extent of the program here.
And that's why, of course, you made the comment that, this may get changed and may not. It's a fluid thing, but right now, this is where we are, so we're dealing with it, and we know we have to replace 91.
Well, the thing that concerns me is the dollars involved. On this 91, we're talking $450,000. That has to be paid back, it be paid back by our water ratepayers through higher rates. And that number bothers me, in fact, that it may continue to escalate and continue on. The worst case scenario would be to replace all our lead services over a short period of time. That's a big number.
Any other comments? Thank you. We have a first and a second to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the consent order that we have already worked out. Is that correct? That the letter's in its final format and it's just a matter of approving the signature? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Anderson.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Jarvis.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Aldermark. Second, Alder Hudson.
First and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Do you want to sign?